Hi, I'm Joanna Barron.
And I'm Leslie Gray.
Welcome to the Love and Dividends podcast where women get smart about money.
We'll share interviews and conversations about optimizing your finances, getting started with investing, and building wealth.
And today we're chatting with my friend, the very cool Lisa Campbell. Lisa is CEO of Mercari Agency Limited. She helps cannabis companies come to market across the country. She was a co-founder of the Green Market, which was a series of underground cannabis market pop-ups. And she also worked in international drug policy before taking the legal cannabis world by storm.
Our guest is preaching from the Cannabis Act Bible on the full legalization of cannabis, her legacy status from a badass Bubby bootlegger during Prohibition, how high-end cannabis lounges will influence the hospitality industry, her experience as CEO of 2 companies in a space which severely lacks representation, and how she stays ahead of the curve by chilling in her own lane.
Enjoy! Okay, so we are here with the quote-unquote badass lady of the Cannabiz, and I can attest that the honorific is accurate, Ms. Lisa Campbell. How's your COVID quarantine life, Lisa?
That's a really good question. Well, I've been back in Toronto for quarantine for the last 3 months. It's very different from my normal life, which usually I'm living in the sky and, traveling across Canada selling cannabis. So it's been really good to be home though and just kind of stay focused too, because when you're working from home, you can really zone in on your tasks. So it's been good. What about you guys? Are you staying home, working from home?
Working from home,
Yes.
starting to venture out a little bit. I work from a co-working space, which I think you do too. I work from WeWork, so nobody's there and it's walking distance from my house. So I've been going in
Oh
just
my God,
because,
it's open.
yeah. Oh, no,
Wow.
it never closed because
It
people who
never
are
closed.
in
Essential.
essential services can work out of there. But yeah, it's a little weird. I had a tense moment because one of my coworkers, because I have like a 6-person office, but I was the only person in there. One of the coworkers came back and he brought his brother, and his brother was working at my desk, and I showed up and I was like, sorry, not cool. These are like 22-year-olds, so they're like, whatever. But no, I'm I'm generally good. So Lisa, you have such a fascinating trajectory. You are a multi-time CEO. You're young, you're a millennial, but you're also, this is the impression that I think anybody who has met you would say, you're not the typical like boss bitch type. Like you're so chill and so chill and open-minded. So can you talk a bit about your career and how you came to be in the cannabis space?
Sure, yeah, of course. So I came to the cannabis space from the nonprofit space. So my background is working in community health and drug policy reform. I was really active at the time with Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy and, was going to all the conferences in the US states where they were legalizing and getting super inspired by the movement in the US. And at the time, before I entered officially into cannabis, it was around right before the election of the Liberals, and there was this buzz in the air that cannabis could be legalized. And at the time, we said if cannabis were to be legalized the same way as alcohol, that our family business, which is actually in wine and spirits, that we would be very interested in entering that space. So I was patiently waiting, but as an activist, I'm not very patient. So I ended up starting Women Grow, which is the Toronto chapter. So it's a network of women in cannabis who are entrepreneurs. At the time, there was around just 10 companies in Canada. I think this was like early 2015. So um, really, the cannabis industry has exploded since then. But since those early days with Women Grow, I actually ended up getting into more activism before the industry really exploded before recreational legalization. So I actually ran a craft cannabis farmers market for 2 years before legalization. We held events across Canada. Toronto was our main squeeze because this is my hometown. So we did like huge events in Toronto with like over 1,000 people and all kinds of cannabis products. So, over 2 years later, we're at this point now where we're finally starting to get all those products into legal cannabis stores. So it's kind of crazy that it's taken us so long to get from like those early activism days to now, we've had full legalization, but for over a year, and we don't have all of those products available. So yeah, my trajectory was very much like from an activism perspective, like we should have the right to access these products. And, if we can have legal alcohol in Canada and around the world, which alcohol is such a carcinogenic substance in comparison to cannabis, it's like cannabis is benign. So, all along we've really been pushing for cannabis to be treated like alcohol, and to have, the same regulations, whether that be marketing or distribution.
Yeah, and your family has a pretty illustrious history in the fight against alcohol prohibition. Do you want to share with our listeners about the rock star women fighting against booze laws in your family?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of multi-generations of activists in our family. My great grand Bubby, she came to North America from the former USSR, and to survive, she was actually a bootlegger in inner city Detroit. So, my Bubby grew up as a
Sick.
child, like basically in a bootlegging family. They ran a rooming house. They were bootleggers. They weren't the bootleggers that you see in the movies that are, shipping whiskey across the border. But yeah, it was really about survival back then, as new immigrants to North America. From there, on my dad's side of the family, we've had a wine and spirits business for quite some time, and we came from the hospitality industry. But as a wine agency, we've had quite our share of tiffs with the provincial government over liquor laws. So we actually had a 5-year court battle for private liquor in Ontario, which we ultimately ended up losing. We had to close our business for a short time, and but ultimately now, so many years later, all the things that we fought for liquor, we're not quite there, but currently in Ontario, restaurants can deliver. So it's almost better than having a private liquor store. So a lot of restaurants, to kind of save the hospitality industry, have pivoted. So my sister actually is running a wine delivery service right now, which delivers across the GTA, called Grape Witches. So back when my Bubby was a kid, bootlegging, to now where my sister is, through the Ontario, these new emergency measures, she's basically selling wine out of her car, almost in the same ways that people used to sell cannabis out of their back trunk back in the day, but it's all now legal and licensed. So we've definitely come a long way with booze regulations, and of course with cannabis, we can also now deliver as well. So we've always fought for private retail, and while I think there really is a place for government in regulation to, ensure that it's a fair market, that there's no diversion, really you need to build systems where private businesses can thrive and where government is not competing against those businesses. So I think we still have a long way to go with cannabis, but alcohol is definitely a blueprint for that.
That's a great explanation. And can you actually set out for us what the lawyers, what is and is not currently legalized in Canada, like when it comes to cannabis? Because I understand, for example, beverages and edibles still may not be legal, and how things have gone in the space since full legalization.
Yeah, so there was a certain point in time where like we weren't sure if edibles were going to be included in legalization, so that was part of our activism. Luckily, edibles, beverages, topicals, they're all included. They're all legal now. Um,
Yay!
yes, finally.
Yes.
But of course, there's limitations because it's regulated by the government, and they've got their mandates to protect the children and health and safety. So
Ah, yes.
For edibles, there is a 10 milligram per package limit. So for consumers that like to enjoy like 50 to 100 milligrams, this 10 milligram limit is like the bane of their existence, and they're not interested in legal edibles. Um, and that's the same for beverages. There's also possession limits, which are the worst. So all lawyers should be aware of the possession limits. So these are personal. So if you're outside of your house, you can only possess 30 grams of dried cannabis flower or equivalent. And you will have to Google all those equivalencies. There's several different forms. Like I think concentrates are like 7.5 grams equivalent. Seeds are like 4 seeds. If you're a beverage, your personal possession is only 2.1 liters. So if you want to buy a 6 pack of beverages and those beverages were 355 milliliters, you would be over your personal possession limits, and you'd be in violation of the Cannabis Act as a consumer. So I think there's
Mm.
still a lot of regulations that we need to push for consumer safety and protection, and also just to have more diversity, especially for patients as well. Like this 10 milligram limit is, kind of short-sighted. But other parts of the law are great. Like concentrates, topicals, you can have up to 1,000 milligrams per package of THC. So the government has definitely done a lot of things right, and things are getting easier, surprisingly, during COVID in terms of licensing. So
Mm.
all those licensing bottlenecks we saw like the first year or so of legalization, hopefully will start to be lifted as things become more efficient.
And that's just because of the online space, or what is it about this time that's making it more efficient?
Yeah, I think it might be the virtual, like now you can do like a video inspection. They're just making the laws a lot more flexible, and maybe it's because people are working from home, but um, before, if you want to have a new cannabis product, you would have to wait 60 days and have all the final packaging ready. So now they have it where if you don't have the final packaging, you can still submit the formulation and what you'd like to do, and they'll do a conditional approval. So um, things things are just becoming easier at a time when I thought they would be more difficult. Licensing used to take years in the previous market, and now I hear 10 months, I hear 60 days. It's just getting way shorter. So same for cannabis retail, right? In Ontario, we're about to explode. Now all these restaurants are applying to have cannabis stores as well, the coolest thing about being back in Ontario is that the government just did a consultation on lounges. So that will be like the next generation
Mm.
of cannabis.
Ooh, cool.
So that's a good pivot to my next question, because I know cannabis and hospitality is sort of one of your niches. Like you've done events with chefs where cannabis is incorporated into the food in all these beautiful ways. And I know that that's kind of a gray area, but do you think that's kind of the future, that whenever the world reopens, we can have like a champagne and cannabis lounge or high-end restaurants where you can have like an infused cod with like CBD oil? Like, do you think that that is a possibility, given how it sounds like what you're saying is industry has been so effective in speaking to the government about how it would like to be regulated? And I know that the cannabis space is so sophisticated and well organized, and it seems like finally the Ontario government is being receptive to that. So, do you think that we can look forward to cool stuff like that in Ontario?
Yeah, we definitely can. What it will look like will be obviously very shaped by government regulations. We probably won't be able to serve alcohol and cannabis in the same venue, but for licensing, I've heard a lot of hospitality spaces talk about having 2 floors, where the first floor is licensed for alcohol, second floor licensed for cannabis. So um, yeah, it's definitely been a result of industry and also activists pushing for change. And a lot of those activists now are, consulting for government, and they're super, super open for feedback. So the Ministry of Attorney General, they did do this consultation pre-COVID. During COVID, they've been obviously looking at the results of the consultation. And what will be so fascinating is to see how fast these changes come. I honestly, given how slow government works, I would be very happy if we had lounges in 2021. like it will probably take that long for them to finalize the regulations. But it's also very possible that they could make it as easy as possible for existing licensed retail stores to convert their licenses to amend and have a consumption space on site. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And I've seen a lot of restaurants apply for these new cannabis retail store licenses. South of Temperance is a good example. And it's just going to be so fascinating to have, all the care, love and care that goes into the hospitality industry to have that applied to cannabis and to create, these relaxing social settings, especially in a post-COVID world. So I imagine that they'll be designed very differently because, of course, you want to have social distancing and all those things, but,
Totally.
eventually we will be getting back to normal, I hope. It's hard to know.
But do you think, like, can you expand on that a little bit? Do you think when we do get back to whatever the new normal looks like, we could be at a restaurant looking at the wine menu and the food menu and the cannabis menu? Like, is that something, is that sort of how this works, or am I misunderstanding?
So it wouldn't be that like the restaurant would get a cannabis license per se. It would be like a separate licensed business, as far as I can
Okay.
understand. There are definitely a lot of restaurant chains that would like to, just have cannabis on the menu. And of course, in Los Angeles, there's examples of that. In West Hollywood, there's a few licensed restaurants that are opening where, they will have cannabis literally on the menu at the restaurant. But
Cool.
the other cool thing is restaurants are converting too, right? So
Okay.
during COVID, of course, the entire hospitality industry has just been completely devastated. There's been thousands and thousands of people who've been laid off. People are
Understand.
going bankrupt over COVID in the hospitality industry. So we're seeing a lot of those spaces being converted actually into dispensaries. And the best example of that is Second Cup. If you look at the Ontario retail applicants, quite a few of those locations are Second Cup locations in very good areas. So I think for
Oh,
hospitality, it's a chance to kind of like reinvent ourselves and come out the other side stronger.
Awesome.
wow.
And do you think more broadly, when you think about sort of like the cannabis industry, legal cannabis in Canada is like a toddler now, I suppose, because we're going into 2 years post full legalization. But as the industry grows up, do you think that there will be like a full on luxury legal market for cannabis where you have like certain terroirs and strains? Like I'm kind of analogizing to the wine industry because I know you have a lot of experience in that industry and obviously a lot of experience in cannabis.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're really looking to do in cannabis is to bring those stories and that passion from the producer to the consumer and to the retailers. Um, Definitely there is room for a premium market, but the trends that we're seeing across Canada is that the provincial distributors are really pushing for low, low, low prices. It doesn't mean that there won't be a premium category for cannabis. As a cannabis consumer, I'm the type of person that will drop like $150 on a gram of, full melt hash, fine artisanal hash. So, definitely that consumer exists out there and they're looking for the most premium products. But because the premium stuff goes, it's less turnover. There's less incentive for the government to bring it in right now because really their goal is to eliminate the black market. So for a lot of the premium brands that are on the market right now, like Broken Coast, Whistler, which is completely out of stock in Ontario, hopefully not delisted, Quest, all of these brands used to be around the $20 a gram price range and now are being pushed to probably like $14-15 average price range. So we've seen a lot of disruption in the premium category and this pressure to make legal cannabis cheaper so it can compete with the illicit market essentially.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, very cool. So just to pivot over, we know you've been very vocal in calling out the cannabis space for its lack of representation. We know that right now women are on just 5% of the publicly traded licensed producer boards, and you're on record for calling out the space as being predominantly run by white men. And yet, we know you've been CEO of two companies. So, how do you think you've been able to break into this space? And do you have any thoughts or commentary on it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was raising such a ruckus from like 2015 to now, so that's like 5 years of shouting from the sidelines saying we need to have more women in cannabis and leadership, I would always get these trolls that would be like, well, why don't you just start your own company? Like, why don't you just, like, to be an executive, you should start your own company and you should be an executive. So, not to say that we shouldn't be shouting from the sidelines for every single company in the industry to diversify and to value diversity, but really that was a catalyst for me to get into the space more formally. I had always come from an activism nonprofit background, so coming into the space, I had to really learn a lot about finance and big business and to like really grasp the scope of the entirety of the industry. So it's a huge learning curve, but I would really say for women who are looking to come into the industry, if you're coming from other careers, we need talent right now. There has been a lot of layoffs, but everyone I know that I'm working with is still hiring. So there's never a bad time to enter the industry, and there's never a bad time to start your own company either. I think that, when we think about entering the cannabis industry, a lot of us think, oh, where am I going to get a job? But really, the system is very broken. And if you can find a pain point in the system where you can provide value as a business, I think that's the best way to shift diversity is to get women actually starting their own businesses where, they don't have to appeal to a board to diversify. They create their own board and they create their own executive where they can make those choices themselves and not have to appeal to the higher powers. So, all these years later, 5 years later, things have not gotten better in terms of diversity. There's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions, which means that, previous companies that were run by women, like 48 North, I'm a huge fan of 48 North, huge fan of their products, their branding. But their two female founders left, and now they have, majority male board, male executive for the most part. So that's the hardest thing with this industry is there's so much, you push for change and you have, the first, oh, maybe they weren't the first, but, two women CEOs like running this licensed producer together, publicly traded, and then everything completely changed. So, it's hard to say what it will take, but we definitely have to keep pushing for diversity because at our current rate, even for pubcos on a whole, like for companies that are on the TSX, for us to change boards so there's gender parity, it will take over 30 years at our current rate. That's not
No,
okay.
too long. Yeah, no. Yeah, we don't like 30 years, but
Yeah.
very cool that that became a catalyst for you to start your own thing. And it sounds like a lot of other women too. I kind of like that rather than try to work in the system. Start your own board, start your own company.
But
That's
Lisa, I'm
sick.
curious, as somebody who also works in the not-for-profit space, how did you have the chutzpah to go from the not-for-profit space to cannabis, where it's like so corporate at this point? It's like, so many trillions of dollars being flowed into this. Are you just a genius? Or I feel like there's some inspiration
Yeah,
you
are
can
you a
give to
genius?
women who are just like, I could never. And I feel like you can be very expansive for people here.
Yeah, no,
Totally.
it was
And
definitely
are you a
like
genius?
it was definitely a huge transition. Like when I started in 2015 getting into corporate cannabis, I knew about the stock market, but I didn't really know about the stock market. Like I didn't know about shorting or how to structure shares or RTOs or like there's so much new vocabulary that I
Wait,
needed to
wait, what are
learn.
RTOs?
Oh my
Yeah.
God, RTOs are so popular in cannabis. It's reverse takeovers. So,
Oh, right.
the most common way in the last 5 years for a cannabis company to go public is by buying a mining shell and then just doing a reverse takeover. So, 5 years ago, I didn't know what a RTO was, and now here I am, and I feel like I still have so much more to learn. Um, but every day I'm learning. So that's the best reason to get into the cannabis industry, for other women who are thinking about it, is that it doesn't really matter where you're starting at. Everyone's kind of, this legal industry has only been around since 2014 or 2013 is when that's when we were first had private cannabis companies in Canada, let alone public ones. So I think that it kind of levels the playing field, and we're all learning together every day. So, even my team, like I'm constantly learning from my team and vice versa. And all I can say is when you read the Cannabis Act, it's like reading the Bible. Every time you read it, there's new interpretation. So, in learning about the regulations of cannabis, because they're so new, it's all still being interpreted, and there's so many creative ways to do things. So I think it does create a more level playing field in that it is a new industry, so everyone is learning constantly. So if you don't know something, it's not the type of industry where people are going to shame you for not knowing that thing, because we're all learning together.
I love that. And the other thing that
That's
I think
so
is really
cool.
cool about your career is you have clearly been able to leverage the fact that you have a background as an activist and in the cannabis, not even space, but just scene. And you've been able to leverage that by working with people in the black market or gray market, I should say, and bringing them to the legal market. So I just think that's a cool thing for people to think about, that there are ways that your existing network, that you can leverage it. And I think that's been one of the things that you've been able to do so effortlessly, right? Like, these people, you've had these markets, you've hung out with these people for years.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating actually. One of my very first dispensary clients, because I used to, in the gray market, I worked at 416 Medicinal, was on King West. So one of my very first clients is now working at a licensed producer, and in the last 24 hours, I did my first facility visits in the last 3 months. Like, with COVID, I wasn't going out. And it was so powerful being at his facility and him just reflecting, like, think about all that we've gone to, and we're finally here and licensed. So yeah, it's definitely powerful to be able to use that voice, but I also have like haters out there that are like, you're representing publicly traded companies, like you can't have political opinions. And I kind of just tell them to fuck off, pardon my French, because I think right now with the state of the world, there's COVID, there's also an epidemic of racism and violence. So it's like there's so much going on in the world, you can't just shut up. It doesn't matter if you're representing a pubco and some shareholders might not like it. Like, I'm not gonna censor myself for that. So yeah, all the companies that we've been working with have been great, but honestly, the industry is not perfect. And as an activist, it's a constant balance of, wanting to shout from the sidelines at every single thing that I find unjust, but you also have to stay focused on your lane as well. And I think I've realized that there might be shitty things in the world, like Dan Bilzerian having the Ignite brand, but really, like, the best thing you can do to succeed and to battle, sexism, toxic masculinity, racism, is to stay in your lane and succeed and be more successful than your competition. If I can buy all of the cannabis that Dan Bilzerian wants to buy at a higher price point, I'm creating a better situation for those farmers. I'm going to have the best weed in the industry. And instead of like, knocking my competition, I can just do better than them. So that's kind of my motivation right now, as a woman in business, is that even though there's all these shitty sexist factors at play in the cannabis industry, to just own my lane and take off the runway.
That's that's so cool. I'm feeling very inspired. I feel like when you first said stay in your lane, I was like, no, go into the other lanes. But really, I think what you mean is like stay in your lane and like cruise ahead. So you're like, I don't even need to be in those other lanes. My lane is on the fast track.
I
I love
bought
to
the
run with the
other lanes.
metaphor. I actually now
Exactly.
own the whole highway. Yeah,
Yeah, just
I'm
like
feeling
own.
so jazzed. So on the theme of you being ahead of the curve, we know that you have sort of for a while been able to predict these trends. So we want to know, what are you watching in cannabis, and where would you suggest that new investors look if we're interested in taking a position or buying stock in a company?
See, it's so hard with stock. Stuff is definitely, there's a lot of value out there in that the market has taken a huge beating. So it's a really good chance to buy low. At the same time, we've seen so many companies go into bankruptcy. So it is really important to not just pick the biggest. I had a friend in the UK who sent me a screenshot of some pot stocks that she was looking at. They're all around like $10 and up stock. I think that it's really important to really look at the companies that you're investing in and not just look at the price of the stock. Look at the outstanding shares, look at their quarterly reports to really decide who you're going to put your money on, because it's no longer the biggest are going to win. We've seen some giants fall in the space. Just today, Believe went into CCAA. So that's another pubco that's gone into bankruptcy in the last day. So you really have to be careful who you choose. Really, I'm seeing a revolution happening with private companies. So if I had a sizable investment and I was looking to grow that investment, I would invest that in a small private company that has room to grow. And I mean, there are still some options out there that are really competitive. Of course, cannabis retail is a huge space that's growing, but a lot of these retailers are bankrupting themselves and overexpanding. So you just have to be really, really careful. It's not who's the biggest and the loudest that's the best investment. Sometimes it's those quiet guys that you've never heard of. So in terms of who I would recommend, we just started working with a great company called Neptune Wellness Solutions. Neptune is traded on the NASDAQ. I'm not sure where their ticker is at now. I do believe it's very competitive compared to MediPharm and Valence, which are two of their competitors. Neptune is a cannabis extractor that's based in Sherbrooke, Quebec, and they're a fascinating company in that they're North American wide, so they're in the US as well, in the hemp space, and they process for some of the biggest companies out there. They process for Canopy, for Green Organic Dutchman, so many different companies. So they're not the most hype company out there. On social media, their presence is very muted, but they're one of the smartest companies that I've come across. And I do think that they're a top secret weapon. They're actually the biggest extractor in Canada with over 200 metric tons of processing power a day. So I think it's like those quiet players that you need to find and not just invest in the Tilrays and Canopies of the world.
I love that. This is some
Cool.
insider gold. Okay, so should we hop over to money wins, Leslie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a tip or a way you save money or something that you bought that you love. You have a money win, Lisa?
So my money win has been the silver lining of COVID is I was able to eliminate my debt. Right before I jumped into cannabis,
Congrats!
I know, I'm so happy. Right before cannabis kind of exploded, I actually got divorced, and that was like a quite expensive process. So I've been recovering and digging myself out since then. So like these last 3 months, I'm not spending money. I'm just staying inside. I'm like making my own meals. I'm not, going out every day, buying coffees. So I think it's those small things that make you realize how much money there is to save in any given day.
And then
Yeah,
you channeled that money towards debt. We love that.
yeah, that's awesome. Are you still buying cannabis though? Or do you
I
get that
am
for
getting a
free?
lot of gifts.
She has to chill. Yeah, you still need to chill.
I still am buying a lot of cannabis though. Holy shit. So luckily for my work, because we're constantly scouting the next, good companies that, aren't really hot on the space yet. I get to try out a lot of different brands and I get to expense that as R&D. But yeah, I also get a lot of gifts. So the Toronto Sun actually did this really cute piece on cannabis gifting in the times of COVID. And just yesterday, I received some cannabis from Bear Organics, which is a new brand in Ontario. So that's awesome. Also, there's this amazing Instagram account that you guys have to follow. It's YEG Grow Girl, like the Edmonton Airport Code, YEG.
Yeah,
And YEG Grow Girl sent me some of the best cannabis I've ever tried in my life. She has like a cookies and cream purple punch pheno, also meat breath, which is a mendo breath cross. So yeah, I've just been so grateful to be able to try all this amazing stuff, and I'm so excited for it all to get licensed. Like now, all these legacy growers can bring their genetics in, so the quality of cannabis is just going to explode over the next year, which is super exciting.
I love it.
Amazing.
Perks of the job. Leslie?
Oh, yeah. I also think it's just funny that one of our initial questions was like, Lisa, how are you so chill? But I think we know. Like, you grow, girl.
No, I've seen Lisa at like 10
No, I'm
a.m.
sorry.
for
Not
breakfast,
just
and
that.
she's still chill. She's just, yeah, preternaturally that way.
Very
I
cool.
mean, I do tend to hit the bong before breakfast sometimes, so that might be my secret.
Nice.
Amazing. My money win is actually a win from Joanna. In one of our recent episodes, The Silver Linings of COVID, Joe gave her money tips. And not only am I a co-host with Joanna, but I'm also a fan of Joe's money tips, even before we had this podcast. And I'm also a fan. And one of the things you brought up was, this is very random, but I really think it needs another shout out because it was my money win this week, was your uncashed checks from Canada Revenue Agency.
Yeah, get your money, girl.
Yeah, Joanna
Yes.
brought this up, and I was like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. She brought it up on the pod. I was like, that's great for our listeners, but like, I'm very organized. I've been doing my own taxes for years. I use Simple Tax, which is now bought by Wealthsimple. I am very A-type. I'm like, I'm not the type to have some sort of uncashed check. That's not me. But then I got curious, popped on, and found from 2007 a check. I'm looking at it right now for $60, never cashed, just sitting there. CRA wants to get it back to me. It's just like, fill out this form. So, it's not a ton of money, but that was such a nice money win. And then I'm a big nerd about compounding interest. Read this whole podcast. So I have my little compounding interest app, and I put it in, and I was like, if I had invested this in the stock market, assuming a return of 8% per year over the last 13 years that it's been sitting there, I would have gained $100 on it. So I'm feeling like so happy, frustrated myself that this money was just sitting there, but want to share it as a money win with everyone. Log on to my CRA, go to click on uncashed checks is what it's called, and it'll just show you immediately what money you have sitting there, possibly from 13 years ago in some
Yep.
sort of check you never cashed. Even if you think like me,
Yeah.
that would never happen to you. It happened to me.
I think everybody I've talked to has had something. So yeah, get your money from the government. God knows they take enough of it as it
Totally.
is. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, so my money win is kind of random, but also kind of life-changing. I found this like 4-hour YouTube called How to Get Rich by this guy named Naval. And it was just, I started listening to it, and it was just like words of a sage. And the title, How to Get Rich, is total clickbait. It's like super profound. It's like stoic philosophy mixed with deep insight into the sort of historical moment we're at, where the only
Mixed with
place,
science.
yeah, mixed with science. So this guy is named Naval Ravikant. He's one of the original investors in AngelList and is a sort of tech guy. But he just goes into sort of how to create your leverage, which is basically the place where you have a competitive advantage, and how, 100 years ago, the leverage was by owning industrial equipment and having labor, and now it's entirely based on producing things that can be replicated without costs, like technology, which is why pretty much the only people that are making massive amounts of money are people in technology and in media. So I'm gonna link to it. I've been listening to like 20 minutes a day because there's just so much to unpack. And yeah, I think it's life changing. I think some of the comments are like, wow, this was like, I went to Wharton for business school, and this 4 hours was more useful than like $100,000 business degree. So it's just brilliant, and it's at an abstract enough level that wherever you are, like, I wish I'd listened to it when I was a teenager, but it would be relevant for a 70-year-old. It's just brilliant. It is art, chef's kiss.
Oh my God, I want to listen to that. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
you have to. Joanna sent it. That's another one where I doubted Joanna. I was like, 4
You're like a
hours.
random
Joanna, I don't.
YouTube called How to
Yeah,
Get
I'm like,
Rich.
I do not have this kind of time, but I'm gonna listen to a little bit of it, token, because she's my partner,
Yeah.
and I listened to the entire thing. I was like, this is the most amazing, and I will be re-listening to it over and over. The leverage. He also does a lot of engineer science talks about how scientists are at the top of his moral code. So, I mean, I was like,
because if you know
soaking
how
it
to
up.
build something, you
He
have
was loving
specific knowledge.
engineers.
Yeah, he
My
loves
peeps.
engineers. Yeah, I
And like
felt a
kind of
little.
hates lawyers.
I felt ashamed as a
The
humanities
lawyer
girl, but it's okay.
always with the lawyers. He's like, I mean, if you want to do law, I guess that's fine.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love everything about it.
Oh my God, I can't
Joanna,
wait to watch
win.
this.
Yeah.
Great
That's
win.
awesome.
Okay, Lisa, it was so great to have you on. We will have a Love and Dividends X Mercari X whatever cannabis dinner party when the world comes back to normal, and it will be glorious. I can't wait.
Yeah, thanks
Cannot
so much
wait.
for having me on, guys.
Yes.
It's such a pleasure, and I can't wait to listen to more of your podcast too, to learn from both of you. It's been an honor.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you
Thanks
so much. With love and dividends.
With love and dividends.
Thank you so much for listening to the Love and Dividends podcast.
If you got value from this podcast, please share it with another woman who could benefit from the information that we shared.
And please consider rating us and leaving us a review on iTunes. It really helps with new podcasts.
If you have questions about finances and investing, have suggestions for future topics or guests, please let us know. You can shoot us a DM on Instagram, Love and Dividends, or you can send us an email at hello@loveanddividends.com.
With love and dividends.